Forward from here.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So we'll start here with this idea of where do we start? We know it's important. We know we want to have some good data to share with all of these different stakeholders who need data, but how do you decide what to measure and where to begin? So today I'm going to share with you one framework that I found really useful in my work and that a lot of different organizations and social enterprises use to think about what they should be measuring. And that framework is called the theory of change. I'm actually really curious in this group on the call, how many people have heard the term theory of change? You can just say yes or no.
Yes.
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 No.
No. Okay. Yes isn't a no?
No.
No. Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
But sometimes I think it's too high on
Okay.
the ground.
Okay. Good point. All right, so we've got kind of half and half, it sounds like. Some people who have heard of it, some people who haven't. And someone who says maybe this is a little too abstract or too far away to be practical. So let's see if we can make this practical and useful for you, Miguel. Hopefully we can change your mind. And if not, maybe we'll find a better framework to fit with your situation. So for those of you who haven't heard of this or who just want a refresher, a theory of change is basically an explanation or a map of how your program works or how your product works. The thing you have, how does that create change in your community? It sometimes reads a little bit like a sentence. If we do this, then that will result. If we provide this service or provide this product or provide this training, then something else will happen, or we think something else will happen. And forming a theory of change can be really powerful. It helps you focus your solution, and then it helps you test your logic as far as whether that solution is really pushing you toward the vision that you're aiming for. And I'm going to show you an example of how this tends to flesh out. So a theory of change tends to have 4 general parts. And the terminology is not all that important, but I'll tell you what it is because you might see it on grant applications, you might see donors use these terms, and so it helps to be familiar with them. So the theory of change is divided into 4 main parts. Number 1 is the input. That's the answer to the question, what do you have? Maybe you have a technology. Maybe you have a workshop space. Maybe you have a training program. That's the thing you're offering. What you have is your input. The output is your delivering of that thing to the people you directly work with. So that might be something like how many people participate in a training, or how many people are using a particular technology. So the input is what you have, and the output is just you directly delivering that thing that you have to somebody else. I'll show you an example in just a minute. Now, you might have something, you might have a training, a technology, you might deliver it to someone, and after that, it's up to them to do something with that thing that you've delivered. And that's where we leap to outcomes. What will they do next now that they have that technology in their hands? Now that they've had that training? Now that they've learned that new bit of knowledge or have access to that new workshop space? What will they do next? What choice will they make? And what change will they make that will then cause a ripple effect later on? And then finally, at the impact level is if all these people you're directly working with make these changes, these small changes in what they do in their daily lives, what will be the change in the community? What will be the vision of how that will impact people? So I'm going to give you an example. Debbie will surely be familiar with this example. This is Frank Molel from Tanzania. Many of you have met him either at IDDS 2014 or by hanging out at Twende. He's a really, really great innovator. And at IDDS 2014 in Tanzania, he worked on a project that is this project here, the manure spreader. They were working in a village called Mbulumbulu, which had very low soil fertility, and so their crop yields were much lower than they could otherwise have been. But they also had a lot of cattle in the community and a lot of manure that was piling up, and people were burning it and not really using it. Some people knew that you could spread around this manure on the fields and that it would actually improve the soil fertility and improve your crop yield. But it's a big pain to get the manure to spread over a very large field. So what Frank's team designed was a manure spreader, where you actually just pile the manure into this cart, and as you roll the cart over the field, it actually spreads the manure in nice pathways across your field. So he's been working on this. He's been selling it to farmers, testing it out with farmers in several different villages around northern Tanzania, and it's been pretty exciting to see the progress. So we actually, about a month ago, we tried to do a theory of change with the manure spreader just to check out how it would work out. Here's what we came up with. So in this case, the input is the manure spreader itself. That's the thing. That's the thing that Frank has and that he's trying to offer. The output is the delivery of that machine to farmers. In this case, they buy it. So he's selling it to farmers. So the output is that maybe the farmers who buy it or who have access to it now. Frank makes the spreader, Frank sells the spreader. Of course, the big next step, now that Frank's gone, Frank has made his exchange and he's back at Twende, what happens next? Well, what we hope will happen next is that farmers will use that manure spreader, that it won't just sit in a shed, or they won't just say, this is too much work, I don't really want to do this. That they actually change their behavior, they change their practice, they change the habit of what they've been doing, and instead start using the manure spreader to fertilize their crops more regularly. So that's the outcome. And of course, Frank's not in control over that, but that's what he hopes will happen. And then the impact that he's trying to see is that ultimately there will be better crop yields in that community for those farmers, that their incomes will improve, there will be more food in that community. That will strengthen the local economy. These were all the big dreams that Frank had for the way the manure spreader could create a larger societal level impact through improving soil fertility in that community. So that is a basic theory of change, how it works. One of the other things we often do with theory of change is think about, okay, so if this is the chain of logic here, if we deliver this manure spreader and farmers buy the manure spreader, then they will use it to fertilize their crops, and then we will have better crop yields, higher farmer incomes, etc. Now, there's a lot of things that could go wrong in this chain. Not everything works out perfectly, as we know, in the world. For example, maybe Frank makes a lot of manure spreaders, but maybe nobody wants to buy it, or no one can afford it, or he doesn't get the transport he needs to get the spreader to the farmers. So just because he has a bunch of manure spreaders at Twende doesn't mean that we're going to actually be able to deliver those spreaders to the farmers. So we make some assumptions, and when we recognize there are some risks between input and output. And that's, I think, a really good part of doing a theory of change, is recognizing the risks in between each step. Similarly, between output and outcome, Frank delivers the spreader, he leaves, he goes back home to Arusha. Some things could go wrong. Maybe the farmers buy the manure spreader, but maybe instead of using them, they sell them to someone else. Or maybe, they buy the spreader, but they've still been burning manure to use for other purposes, and so they never changed that behavior, so they don't really get as much use out of the manure spreader. So we're assuming that the farmers actually hang on to them and that they want to use them. And then finally, between outcome and impact, let's say every farmer that Frank sells a manure spreader to uses it perfectly, uses it at exactly the right times, they kind of follow every direction, they do it perfectly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that yields will, in every single case, improve, or that incomes will improve. Because maybe the spreaders break, or maybe the rains don't come that year, or maybe there's some other problem that that prevents crop yields from improving. So Frank's manure spreader doesn't have control over the whole situation, but he can do his best in terms of his design to make sure that they're used properly, that they hold up against wear, that farmers can afford them. So sometimes by going through all these assumptions, it actually helps the design process as well. But that aside, just going back to the main parts, input, output, outcome, and impact, this actually gives us a map as to what we might be able to measure. So inputs, that's pretty easy to measure. How many spreaders did you build? Output, also pretty easy to measure. How many spreaders did you sell? How many farmers now have access to a spreader? Oftentimes, Frank was telling me that usually when he sells a spreader, it's not just to one farmer. It's to something like 5 or 6, a group of 5 or 6 farmers will pool their money and buy a single spreader together. So if he sells one spreader, it actually means 5 farmers have access to that spreader. And that's the number that he uses to say this is how many farmers have access. So measuring your inputs and outputs is pretty straightforward. And in most reporting, like a monthly report, this is the kind of stuff that you'll see asked for. All right, how many did you make? How many did you sell? How many people went to the training? That type of thing. Inputs and outputs, really good stuff just to kind of track your daily progress, what's going on. Now, outcome is a little harder to measure. What % of these farmers are now fertilizing crops with manure? Or what % of farmers in that community are using manure to fertilize crops? Thinking about the transition from how many farmers have a manure spreader to the how many farmers are actually using it regularly. And that might be a little harder to find out. You might need to follow up. You might need to do some kind of survey. You might have to, you might actually tag a little sensor to the bottom of the manure spreader and see if you can track the usage remotely. There's different ways you could measure usage, but it's a little bit harder to measure because it's no longer in your control. And then finally, you might decide these are some things I really want to measure from my customers. I'd love to know the difference or the, what their new crop yields are or what their incomes are from their crops. And that you might be able to do a special study to try to find that out. But it's also a little bit harder, a little bit more involved than just counting how many spreaders you sold. So this is what we came up with in Twende, just a simple theory of change for Frank. We have it in map form, drawing form, we have it in text form. And either way, it helped us determine what types of things could we measure about the manure spreader. And here's just a little cartoon. Here's your input. There's your output. Somebody uses the coffee. And there's your outcome. Now, it's all good and well to think about theory of change when it comes to a product. Sometimes it's a little bit more straightforward. But as we know with the innovation centers, you guys have all sorts of really interesting kinds of programming. You're doing workshops about Arduinos in Pakistan. You're doing workshops on how to make toys in Colombia. There are CCBs going on in Tanzania and many other innovation centers. And many of these programs are really new and experimental. And maybe we're not really sure what the theory of change is yet. Maybe that's still in development. So for a CCB, for example, we might know that the input is the training. In the picture I have here, the input is kind of, you've got your tools, you've got your training manuals, you've got your beautiful trainers there. So you have the training itself and everything that comes in the training. And your output is that you deliver that training to X number of people, maybe farmers, maybe students, maybe entrepreneurs, whoever you're delivering it to. And you might be able to measure how many CCB trainings you've delivered, how many people were trained at a CCB. But the questions you might still have are, okay, what next? What do we want them to do next? What is the impact we want to have in this community through our CCB trainings, or through our Arduino workshops, or through our toy making series? And so what I recommend that you do in your teams is try to think through this map. Try to think through what is the vision of impact you're trying to contribute to in that community through that thing you're offering. And what are the outcomes, what are the behavior changes that are necessary in order to contribute to that impact? And here's one way you could approach that in your team. I recommend starting with impact, actually. I recommend starting with having a collective vision for how you want to see the community in the future. We did this at Twende about a month ago, where we said, okay, you're doing CCB, you want that to contribute to a larger change in Arusha. What are your hopes and dreams? What are your hopes and dreams for Arusha? What we did with this group, and which might work for your team, or you might want to do it in a different way, is we had everybody just write down on an index card their vision for the future and what they thought CCB might contribute to in Arusha in the long term. And then we had them share with the person next to them and kind of compare and contrast and adjust their vision based on the vision of their colleague. And then we shared as a group together. And after a little while, we were able to consolidate all of these hopes and dreams into a collective vision. This is the vision that we share as a team for what we would love to see the future look like. And this is the future we want to contribute to through our Innovation Center, through our Innovation Center's program, through whatever technology we're working on. And so we created that vision together, and I'm not going to show it to you because, too specifically, because I think it's important for everybody to come up with their own. But if you're interested, I'm happy to share. Once your team comes up with that collective vision, and many of you may already have something like this, like a mission statement or a vision statement, then you go to the outcome level, what you want people to do. The people you work directly with, the community members that you're training, the school kids or the farmers that you work with. You think of those people you work with and you say, what do they need to do in order for that vision to come true? Who do you work with, and after the program or after the intervention, after the training, what do you hope they will do? And the way we did this in our teams was in our workshop, was for each person to have a stack of Post-its and just write down different actions they wish to see from different groups. And then we just went around the room, stuck them on pieces of paper for each of the types of people we worked with. What do we wish they would do? And then as a group, we combined all of that into a few key outcomes we wanted to see and a few key impacts we wanted to see. And there was our theory of change. And it was a theory of change that everyone had contributed to, everyone agreed upon, and everyone was excited about. It was actually really cool because afterward, when we put it all together and read it out loud as a theory of change, everybody clapped, which made me think that, all right, everyone can get behind this. And that's why I say that sometimes measurement is a good way to get the team on board with the same vision. And from there, you can decide, all right, for each of these Post-its, for each of these outcomes we want to see, maybe the outcome is we want to see them continue to create technologies in their everyday life, or we want to see them keep coming back to the workshop, or we want to see them deciding to study science at university, something like that. For all of those things, we decide, okay, that's something we can track. That's something we can measure. We can go to those participants later on and say, all right, how many of those people did that thing that we hoped they would do? What's really nice, too, is you can actually you can involve the community members in this discussion. It's not just up to the staff to determine what you want the community members to do. They might have an opinion as well on what their vision is for the future through their participation in this training and what they hope to do next. And the more you can take their opinions into account, the better. So as you are going through this process and determining which outcomes and which impacts you're looking for and want to try to measure, the advice I would give is that less is more. Don't try to have a list of 50 or 100 different indicators that you're trying to track. Start with the ones that resonate the most with you and with your team. If you, and you could go through this exercise, if you could just measure one indicator, one outcome, or one impact, which would you pick? Which is the most important? And there are lots of examples out there, and I'm happy to share some with you that we've used at different parts of IDIN. But it really mostly depends on your team and what is most important to you. And so just to start to round it up, that process I just described to you was this process of defining what you want to measure. And that's the most important step, to, as a team, define what is important to you to measure. And after that, everything else follows suit. Then you decide, okay, how am I going to collect that information? What does that look like? Is that I collect that from every single participant? Do I do this in a survey once a year? What does that look like in terms of collecting? Who's collecting that information? Do I need somebody to help me do that, like a student or an intern? Where do I put that information after I collect it? Does it all stay on paper, in a folder, in a closet? Or do I type it up into a spreadsheet? Or do I put it in an official database? Where do I store that information so that I can get it later and so that I can use it later? How am I going to process that information so it makes sense? Maybe there's a quantitative analysis that you want to do. You want to get average numbers or percent numbers. Or maybe it's a qualitative analysis where you want to read through a lot of feedback forms and pull out the main ideas. But who's going to do that? And how does that happen? And when does that happen? These are questions to ask yourself. But then the most important step is the last step, utilize. How are you going to use that information? Where does it go? Who needs it? What decision will you make if you have that bit of information? Where will that go? What will it help you do? Now, what's pretty typical in M&E systems, monitoring and evaluation systems, is that people define a lot of things that they want to know. They say, oh gosh, I want to know these 20 different things, and I want to collect them all the time. And this is kind of what happens, is you define a lot of things, and then you collect as many of them as you can, but we're all operating under limited resources. It's hard to collect every single thing we want to know. And then, all right, so you collect as much as you can, and then maybe some of that gets stored in the drawer or in the spreadsheet or in the database, but you might not have entered every single bit of data because you didn't have time. And then once it's in that drawer, or once it's in that database, gosh, how much of that gets taken out again to get analyzed? Not as much, usually. And then by the end of it, what is usually happening is very little of the information that you have collected is actually being used in the end. And that's pretty typical. And so what my advice to you as you're deciding on your M&E systems is, rather than defining a really large group of things and then getting overwhelmed on how you're going to collect and store and analyze and use all of it, I would say, instead of this upside down triangle, try to have a more even pipeline where you define fewer things and you collect, store, analyze, and use everything you collect. So it's a really efficient system. You're not collecting any more than what you need. You're not overwhelming your staff with collecting a bunch of information you're not going to use. And so that way we can go from this, where we are collecting all this stuff that ends up in a drawer no one looks at, to this, where we're able to use and respond to every data point we collect. So this is the bottom line. You want to make an M&E system that matters. First, you want to decide what's important to know together as a team with the key stakeholders that are important. 2 is to collect it and process it, crunch it quickly and painlessly. Try to do it in a simple way. Try not to overwhelm your systems. Only collect what you can handle and what you're going to use. And then finally, find ways to share it, to discuss it with each other, and to use it in your everyday work. And that can be what we talk about at the end of this call, what ways to do that. So that's all from me for now. I think now the idea is to open it up to discussion, talk a little bit about everybody's experiences with measurement, any questions that we might have, and yeah, I think we'll go from there. Thanks for listening, guys. Hello? Is everybody there? Anybody have a question? I think everybody's muted.
Okay, so I can wait for the rest about question, but I have one, Laura.
Yeah.
When you put your framework about like input, output, that's okay. Like that's happened. That's easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
But when you jump from the output to the outcome,
yep.
The most of the time become a chaos because
yeah.
because it's not logical as you explain. Yep. It's not cause and a consequence, you know. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things happen as an outcome that it's hard to measure, or even like, for example, something that happened here in our innovation center. We're having a situation where we did a workshop to teach people how to work with wood. And after that, we didn't have any news about what they use for their knowledge. Mm-hmm. But 2-3 weeks after that, or like, I don't remember if 3 weeks or 1 month after that, I saw some pictures on the Facebook where mm-hmm. people start to build snooker tables mm-hmm. with the knowledge they learn about the workshop wood. Mm-hmm. So, and I saw that on the Facebook because I was like leading with the Facebook. I was doing things on Facebook, but I didn't have any measurement process to mm-hmm. really get that information and track that information. You know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, and I think it's something that's pretty common with all of the types of trainings we do, whether it's IDDS or CCV or a woodworking workshop, and we can't always predict what people will do with it, and so we go based on our experience or based on our hopes and dreams, and we say, okay, let's think about this woodworking workshop. What's the theory of change of the woodworking workshop? What do we want people to do with this next? Well, maybe we want them to apply those woodworking skills to make something of their own. Maybe that's something we are excited to see happen. And I think if you talk to community members, and since you're observing these things happening on Facebook, that actually confirms that that is an outcome that is possible and desirable. And so you can say, okay, maybe I would like to make the commitment to measure that, to say, all right, out of the 10 people who came to my woodworking workshop, if I go back and talk to them 2 months later, how many of them have done woodworking on their own afterward? And you can go and you can talk to those 10 people, or you can call them on the phone, and you can find out how many of them have tried to do something with wood since the training ended. So it's possible if you define it as a particular outcome. Now, another strategy, so that's one strategy, is if you've defined it as an outcome and said, this is an outcome I'm interested in, and I'm going to seek out and measure that in particular. Another strategy is a strategy called outcome harvesting, and I can share more information about that. And that's really, really open-ended. That's going in and saying, I have no idea what people are going to do with this after the workshop is ended. Let me just go and talk to people and find out. And that way you go and you have a conversation and you say, hey, what's different? What's changed since, in the last 6 weeks, in the last 2 months? And maybe they'll say, oh yeah, I made the Snookers table that and used my woodworking skills to do that. Or maybe they'll say, the table in my house broke and I was able to fix it because I had these new woodworking skills. And maybe they'll say, well, because I was really interested in this workshop, I decided to sign up for a club at my school where they build things after school, or sign up for a new class because I was so interested. Or maybe they'll say, nothing's really changed for me. Same old, but it was a fun workshop. Thanks, Miguel. And by having those open-ended conversations, it gives you more ideas for what are the outcomes that might be interesting to you to track. So that's what we did in Tanzania. Is we both did this with the staff, where the staff decided here are the hopes and dreams that are important to us. And then we spoke to a bunch of participants and we said, what's different for you? What's changed? And we found out that they had a lot of ideas of things that had changed that the staff hadn't predicted. And then we came back together and said, okay, here are the 3 or 4 things we're going to try to measure consistently, and everything else we'll try to capture when we can. We'll tell stories, but maybe we won't try to capture it all the time quantitatively. So it is hard, it's complicated, and we're operating in a place where this is all social change, right? And behaviors could change in a lot of different directions. But giving ourselves the opportunity to listen and to think about what that could be and what would be positive to see, it helps, and it helps us get it more systematically.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Miguel. We can talk about it too. Maybe you and I can have a separate call and try to talk through it kind of step by step.
Yeah, I have more thoughts about that. We can talk afterwards.
Great. Who has tried to measure some stuff already? Like who's already tracking things in their organization, and what's the experience you've had so far? Does anybody want to share an experience?
Tunde, did you guys do any tracking from the summer programs?
Not really. So we've not had any way to. We don't have the resources, the time to track the students. We wanted to do that after the last summer camp, but we never got around to it.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some resources with you on that type of thing. Like I said, we made an instrument for CCD in Tanzania. We have instruments from IDDS where we use to follow up with people afterwards. And you might be able to adapt them depending on the outcomes you're interested in and this particular group.
And this is a huge challenge for organizations of the scale that we're all working at. Just having the human resources to do this work and to make it a priority when we feel like we're all scrambling just to deliver services to the community members that we're trying to serve. But one of the reasons that I thought it was so important to have this call is if you think about the work that you do, it can be so easy to get, this is my experience at Artisans Asylum, certainly. We would just get into the mode of pushing and pushing and pushing to deliver and not actually have a sense of how well what we were pushing to do was delivering on what we cared about. And also, it made it harder for us to raise money because we weren't tracking the impact that we had a sense we were having. And so when you think about it as far as, okay, you have limited resources, you have limited budgets, you have limited staff, one of the important things that you need to do in order to increase your budget by generating revenue from funding sources is being able to tell these stories. And so it's very important to try to find a way to carve out, like make a space, make a time in someone's schedule or in everyone's schedule, even if it's small, but make it regular, to dedicate to this work, because it's an investment, really, in the long run. And so this is something we all struggle with. It is exactly what Tunde was saying. It's like, oh, we wanted to measure it, but then we didn't have the time, we didn't have the people. And so something that Laura and or I can do with you guys over the course of the next few weeks or months is, if you are having trouble figuring out how to fit that in, or how to make it efficient, we can try to think about, like, what's the highest impact one day you could do, or, you know, how do you make it just 1 hour a week or something like that, where you think about, okay, we just need to work this into our process. We need to make it efficient so that it's not so terribly difficult to do.
Yeah, that's a great point, Molly. It really all comes down to trying to build it into the process and not making it an extra thing on top of it, but just picking maybe one or two things that you say, I'm going to measure these one or two things. Even one or two things makes a huge difference over 0. So maybe you're not measuring inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impacts at this stage. That's okay. But to start the habit of having one or two of those things that you track, one or two data points, and building that into your day-to-day, it really, really can have a huge impact for the organization, especially when it comes to communications and fundraising.
Any other questions? What questions do you have? Or experiences that you might want to share with this issue?
I'm sorry if I'm talking a lot, but can I share one more thing? We're not exactly tracking the results, but we are trying to track in the process, and I feel that at least it helped a lot in the last 6 months. When you ask, for example, for Tempeh, the guy that stays every time in the center, he needs to take a picture, at least 5 pictures per day, and at least make 3 movies in the center. And doesn't matter about what, but he needs to take that. And in the beginning, we felt that the most of the time, like, is not good things, not data to analyze what's happening inside. But after some time, he started to get the sense about what take pictures and about what track in the movies. So because of that, we got to create at least, for example, our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean? Like, not track exactly what you want to see in the future, but create a process and create data so you can analyze the data afterwards. Just a experience that we had here.
That's great, Miguel. That's a really cool example, and it's a good example that data doesn't just have to be numbers on a survey. It can be pictures, it can be videos. This information could all be really useful.
Okay, Laura has to run to another meeting. So there's a tricky thing that I discovered about Google Hangouts on Air over the course of this last hour, which is we can actually only have 10 people on the call at any given time.
Oh, no.
So we're gonna stop the call here, just because it's now set up on Laura's computer. It's not easy to hand it off. No, please.
Do you want to hang on to it and I can just
go?
Okay? Yeah, that's fine.
We'll just do another 10 minutes for whoever is wants to hang out, say hi, or give us any updates about what's been going on with you. So a few people came onto the call who I'm not sure everybody knows. Is Omar still with us? Omar is still with us. Omar, do you want to just say a sentence or two about who you are to the group?
Yes, thank you, Molly. My name is Omar Crespo. I'm from Guatemala. I'm an industrial designer, and I'm actually just establishing this association in Guatemala, and we're focusing on sustainable development in communities. And what we're working on right now is that we're designing this innovation ecosystem around communities in Guatemala, and we're focusing right now on the first kind of intervention of in this approach, and we're working a pilot project around cooking systems. But the plan is that we end up with not just one innovation center, but kind of several with different visions. I mean, it's kind of complex. I'll get into details some other time. But that's why I'm here, because I'm very interested in listening to all the experience of you guys from innovation centers around the world. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you, Omar. Jorge, would you, sorry, I said that automatically seeing the way you spell your name, George Apia. I was wondering if you would introduce yourself as well. I don't know that everybody on the call knows you either. George? You might be on mute. Okay, perhaps we don't have an intro from George. So it's after 10:30, so if anybody has to go, you can of course head out.
Hello.
Oh, hey George.
Hello. Hey, hi. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is George. I'm part of the co-founders for Kumasi Hive, and we are putting together a multi-space, as we call it, to help foster innovation and promote entrepreneurship here in Ghana, to specific Kumasi. And it's good to be part of this networking group. So far I've learned so much, and I'm looking forward to learning more and also sharing what is happening over here. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, George. The Kumasi Hive just opened their doors in January. So we look forward to hearing stories about how everything is going. I just wanted to take a few minutes for those of you who are still here. Just if anybody wants to share kind of either something that has happened in the last month or so that you're particularly excited about that you just want to share, and also kind of what people's biggest pain points are right now. What are you struggling with? What should I be thinking about how to help you with, or what can the rest of the group help out with? And we can just do maybe 15 minutes of sharing and see what we can all maybe put some time into over the course of the next few weeks. And it can help me decide what's the highest priority thing for us to talk about next month. Does anyone want to go first? George, can I pick on you again, since you're just getting started?
Sure. Well, yeah, I think for us, we are more currently putting up things together. We have been spending about close to about 80% of our time getting materials in and tools and equipment to the place and working on one or two things. So it is more beyond the grounds work and getting things started. What the exciting thing that's happened so far, I think well, our training programs and our training space has been popular. So far we have about 4 training programs that we have organized, ranging from Arduino programming to C# to animation and all that has been organized, and we have about close to about 200 people passing through during these various classes, and we're excited about it, and something that we are looking forward to measuring and then tracking to see how best would the skills that they come here to acquire, what impact it will make in their lives and things like that. And also we want to also track something like will they be coming again, these people that pass through for other activities that we organize. Yeah, so in that aspect, what we are excited about the training programs that we have been doing, and we are looking forward to starting other programs too, and to see the prospects of it. So that's the little from here for now.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Max or Julio or Johanna, do you want to tell us something that you guys are kind of working on right now, something that you might be able to use help with?
An exciting thing that happened in the last month or two was IDIS, and I think we met a lot of new cool people who are excited about using or contributing to the Innovation Center. I guess we haven't opened officially. We got the space in December, and then IDIS happened, so we really didn't have much resources much time to focus on this, but that has changed now in the last couple of weeks, and we are developing a training program. I think we're starting with Arduino classes and developing a curriculum for that, working together with the design department of another university. And we're aiming to offer more courses within the next month and developing more curriculum for that. And I think we could use probably some feedback and help with doing that, what to focus on maybe, and feedback on the curriculum.
Feedback on the curriculum and ideas for curriculum, is that?
Yeah, that too. I mean, like Arduino is I guess almost a no-brainer, sitting at an IT university. But then a little bit maybe a debate of whether we want to do more software trainings and where to start with that, or going. There was some excitement by the alumni of IDIS about using Buildits to teach the design process. Yeah.
Great. If anybody has some resources for Max or has some time to look over their curriculum, reach out. Max, also don't hesitate to send stuff out to the group.
Sure.
Document.
I'll definitely do that.
Look over it.
Well, in Bogota we have like a lot of things going on. Since January, we are, as I told you before, with the TOT, the Trainer of Trainers. Through that training, so we increase the community. We increase people that can help us with CCBs or with other workshops. It's a really good thing. At the same time, we are working in the IDDS that will be hosted in June. And we are working in some other grants, like not just IDDS grants. We're trying to apply for other grants, other international foundations that can help us to develop bigger programs. And I really find interesting this conference because we haven't actually taken the time to verify what is the outcome or what is the impact we're pursuing. So we're delivering a lot of activities, and we're increasing community, and we're making a lot of partnerships. Which at the same time is great because we're getting to know more community and other people where we can work with and like teach them all this design methodology and try to start a program, like experience with them. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and we haven't had the time to engage all the team.
Yeah.
To work with that. So I think this opportunity, when you have the time to think about the outcome, think about what are the next steps, what are the risks, what we expect. It's a great opportunity to start like gather the people closer.
Perfect. And Laura and I are both available if you want to talk through ideas for how to incorporate that into the process so that it doesn't feel like too much effort to try to make it happen.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure, of course. I think we're just about to lose Max. We just lost Max, but it looks like Max wants to talk to you about the training of trainers. Debbie, how are things with you? How's it being home? Thank you, Johanna.
Hey, it's good to be back. Things are good. Yeah, I actually was hoping Adriana, so she's a new fellow, or not new, she's been here for 6 months, but she's new to these calls, and I was kind of hoping she would give a little update from the Twende side because she's been here more than I have. So
awesome.
So I guess the past month or two we've had a lot of volunteers or interns lately. We had the group we had a D-Lab class from MIT coming here working on a plastic bag recycling project. And then also several interns from Chile who were here working on shorter term projects. And we have one MIT grad here now continuing this project to recycle plastic bags through weaving them into other bags that can be sold and reused. And I guess one question that we were coming up with is how do you evaluate when a project is worth continuing and when you're just pouring a lot of time and effort into it and it's not going to go somewhere.
Oh, interesting. And so this is not necessarily just an impact question in this case. You're talking about the innovations themselves?
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, taking into account the whole ecosystem that exists around that innovation. For instance, you have any product, there's always other organizations in any country or city that work probably on similar things. And
right.
It's like, what is our place in continuing projects, or what is our place in pushing things along when they don't have a specific champion, etc.
That's a really interesting challenge. I would encourage you to start that conversation on the Google group, and that's something we can also talk about. It might just be helpful to come up with some, like, similar to the impact conversation from today, just coming up with some sort of set of criteria for yourself of what makes a project worthwhile, and then set some schedule for evaluating it, I don't know, every 6 months or something like that. But, on some level, there are a lot of different things that you could take into consideration when making that call. So that might just be a process of coming to an agreement on what your criteria are, and then seeing what happens when you apply those criteria, so see what starts to fail. And you might actually have an interesting experience where you find things failing and then you decide, no, we don't, like, that doesn't seem right. We feel like this is a thing that we should continue, which might actually be helpful feedback on the criteria that you set in the first place. But that's something we can talk about more, and that might be an interesting conversation for the group. But some of that, you might be able to use some of the theory of change impact framing just as a baseline for how to think about it and how to think about evaluating that. Does that make sense?
Are you saying evaluating the project as it relates to the theory of change for the workshop in general, or the theory?
I'm saying two things. One is, theoretically, all of the work that you do on the innovations should be part of your theory of change,
right.
Have a place in that kind of system. And so figuring out if those particular projects are fulfilling those goals is one thing. But also just in the somewhat more conceptually, having a framework for like the idea of setting a goal for a particular project or setting a goal for projects in general in a similar sort of systematic way, and setting the goal for yourselves of then evaluating like how will you, like just deciding, okay, this is what we want to accomplish by fostering technologies here. This is how we indicate whether we have succeeded in that goal or failed in that goal in any particular project. And then this is going to be our system, our process for evaluating each project according to those criteria or those goals. And kind of creating some sort of schedule or process or expectation around evaluating things for continuation or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else that anybody is like, oh man, it would be really helpful to talk to somebody about or to get this kind of resource right now?
I will suggest the last step here, but we continue working on volunteers and how to engage volunteers, especially right. The year is just beginning for us. After Carnival, things start picking up just now in Brazil,
Right.
and so we are trying to we are still working on strategies to engage more volunteers as we have scheduled to have more workshops actually this year in both semesters. And so how do we keep bringing a fixed flow of volunteers to the innovation center and how to engage them, right? And how do we bring new people every time as well? We don't want the same people the whole time. We want new people and we want to create more skills as well and new skills. So how do we do that? And we are coming up with actually a very cool program that we're gonna talk about in our next report, and we're gonna launch that next month as well. So we're very excited about that, and I would love to share that a little bit more in our next call.
That would be great. I also encourage you even just to email it. Like if you have a report, you could just email it out to the group for people to read and for feedback.
Sure.
That would be good.
What's the program about?
So it's an online program. It's something that actually started at Chaos, Miguel's company, where people just volunteer to write posts about innovation. So they would actually pick a link or something that they will find on the internet or find interesting and just post a comment or something, commenting on that article. And so we want to do the same thing, but focused on social innovations. And we want these people that are actually writing this blog on our website to have a commitment of 2 Saturdays a month for 3 months, so that they can actually be a fixed flow volunteer. So they are not only having this window so that other people can get to know what they're writing about, but they will also be contributing to the innovation center in a physical way, right? And so we want to have these online programs every 3 months. So we want to keep renewing these volunteers every 3 months. And hopefully we're planning to have at least 20 volunteers for each of the programs. And so that means at least 60 volunteers throughout the year, which is already a good thing compared to around, if I'm not wrong, 35 that we had last year. So we're trying to double the number for this year. And hopefully we get more, who knows?
That's awesome. I'm really excited to read more about it and hear more.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the launch, and if it works, I'll share with you guys how things are going, and probably ask for your feedback as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, the three of you who are left. And I'll send out links to video, and the notes are already out, and I'll just clean those up by the end of the day. And yeah, I encourage you to send us any questions and continue these conversations with your teams and with the rest of the group. Let me know if you need anything. Have a great rest of your days.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Debbie.
Bye. Oh, guys.
Bye.
Bye.